Welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. I'm excited to talk books today with you.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. So can I ask you the first question today?
Shoot.
Let's do it. So we just wrapped up 2023 at the time of this filming. So I'm curious, what was the best book that you read in 2023?
Ooh, best book that I read. That's a tough one. I'll be the first to admit that I'm more of an audiobook person, and,
That's
and that's why I
okay.
was I was excited to have you on because of that reason. Um, hmm,
We can count
best
audiobooks.
great. Hmm, maybe the Four Agreements. I was just talking about this book yesterday, actually. It's a great book. It was on. I remember growing up, it was on my parents' sort of bedstand for years for whatever reason. And I always thought it was like sort of a religious book, and growing up there was a lot of religion, and I was like, no, I don't want to read that. So it's funny to pick it up, 20 years later and not be able to put it down. It was a great book. So that's
Yeah.
probably one of because it's such a short book, or like, comparatively short, that that I loved it. It was a good one. So a
Yeah,
little bit
it's
of
an amazing
history
book.
in there. So, oh yeah, you've read it? Fair enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I had his son, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., on our podcast to talk about The Mastery of Self, which was a book that his son had written. But The Four Agreements is a wonderful book. And it's funny, we were talking, North America, Central America, South America before we press record. And one of my first memories really traveling in Central and South America when I would visit bookstores is how popular that book, The Four Agreements, is. It's translated, it's distributed very well. And I think that's probably because he's originally of Mexican descent and Spanish was probably his
Hmm.
first language as an author. But yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a great book. My favorite one is Be Impeccable with Your Word. That's one of the four, right?
Definitely, yeah. It's a good one. I think number two is the most difficult, sort of not taking things personally.
I know.
Uh, so, yeah. But it's funny because when someone recommended it to me, I thought I had never heard of it, because my parents speak Spanish, so the book was in Spanish, and you're right, everybody knows that book down here, because for whoever's listening, I'm in El Salvador at the moment, but yeah, it's like all over the place. It's interesting.
Well, thank you for indulging my curiosity and letting me moderate for a minute there.
And no worries, no worries. So since we're already talking about audiobooks, the question that I have for you, right, is, or the thing that I was most wanting to ask is what's your opinion on audiobooks, right? Because I feel like you can read quicker when you are just, with with a paperback book, right? But for those of us that have a slight ADD, it's better. Audiobooks are, you can get through the book quicker, and more consistently rather. So I'm curious, what's your take on that?
I have mixed feelings, as you would probably anticipate. Here's the matter of the fact for me. I consume about 100 books a year. Maybe 20 or 30 of them are audiobooks. So audiobooks definitely play a role in how I satisfy curiosity, build skills, solve problems. I love audiobooks. In fact, Audible is the primary sponsor on my podcast. So I'd probably get penalized financially if I didn't love them, right? But but on the other side, I definitely make an argument for reading a physical paper book if your goal is to get the most out of the book, because 80% of the inputs to our brain, 80% are visual. So by default, if you're only listening to information, you're at a disadvantage. It's harder to form a relationship to a brand new piece of information if you're only consuming it through your ear. And most of the time when we listen to audiobooks, at least I know this for me, I'm multitasking. So I'm driving in the car, I'm commuting to work, I'm walking, I'm at the gym, I'm doing chores, I'm busy doing admin work for my business. And so I'm multitasking. So not only am I not leveraging the visual input, I'm also multitasking. And I think a lot of people listening or watching this show today are probably like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. I do that as well. So for me, like I said, I love audiobooks. I choose to listen to books that aren't really for building skills or solving problems. I choose to listen to books for fun. Like I love listening to memoirs or biographies, autobiographies about people that I'm just curious about, like I want to learn more about them. For instance, I just listened to the new Walter Isaacson biography of Elon Musk. It's like a 25-hour audiobook or something, but it was fascinating. And I wasn't going into that book to change my life. I was going into that book to become inspired maybe a little bit, to learn more about Elon, not really to
Mhm.
take notes and try to absorb as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's the perspective. I read a book or, the book Sapiens. It's also one of those
I listened to that
25.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to it. I was like, I'm not going to get through this one if, if I don't listen to it. But something you said sort of struck a chord there. I think sort of that relationship between your audio and your visual response, or like audio and visual influences. And I know something that I've read is that people that listen to music, say they're studying for an exam, and people that are listening to music, if you listen to that same music when you're taking the exam, you do better on average. And so then there must be something there, right? Where, say you like to listen to your audiobook while you do the dishes, maybe next time you do the dishes and you're not listening to the audiobook, you'll remember, some of the topics.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is anchoring, and there's a common, I suppose, area of neurolinguistic programming or positive NLP that deals with anchoring. And so, yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it like that before, but I'm sure it works like that. Here's a recommendation that I make in the beginning of my book, Rise of the Reader. I say, why not leverage both at the same time? Why not read the physical paper book and listen to the audiobook of that book at the same time? Because just like you said, an audiobook keeps you pacing, like it keeps you consistent. But the physical paper book, that input is so important from a cognitive perspective. So why not double up and get a little bit of both?
Mm. I, there's one book, the only book I've ever done that with is called The Power of Now, because it's just so, man, that guy really makes you think, and I just
Totally,
couldn't,
yeah.
yeah, I just couldn't get through it, just sitting by myself there. So I did that combo, and it definitely gets the job done. So that's an interesting anecdote. Um, but my next question would be on the aspect of speed reading, right? Like, there's people sort of, if you think back to, what is this guy's name? Ted Lope? No, not Ted Lopez. Ty Lopez.
Tai
Uh,
Lopez, yeah.
yeah, I remember seeing some of his videos back in the day, and it's just like, oh, you can just scan for keywords and all these different things, and it's like, are you really consuming some of that information? And then I've read a little bit about, so when I was reading the 4 Hour Work Week, um, uh, he has a different techniques where you put sort of a card on the page, and you can scan again for keywords, similarly. But yeah, what techniques can you offer up here,
Well,
or what's your take rather?
let's do the philosophical take first.
Right.
Just like you, I I consumed some Tai Lopez content when I was first starting my reading journey, and Tai had that company Mentor Box where you would get 20 book summaries mailed to you and blah blah blah. And he taught different speed reading strategies. I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan, so the 4 Hour Work Week, and I've listened to Tim talk about. I mean, Tim used to teach a speed reading course at Yale or whatever school he went to, Princeton, and he literally taught speed reading courses for other students. And then, I mean, the second or third guest ever on my podcast was Jim Quick, again, who teaches
Mm,
speed reading. And I even interviewed Howard Berg, who at one point held the Guinness Book of World Records, like record for fastest reader with highest retention, however it was structured. So I've done my fair bit of research. Here's where I sit today. I do believe that reading is a skill, and I do believe that reading speed will be improved naturally over time. And there are certain tips and tricks and strategies that you can use to improve your reading speed. And some of them actually show that you can improve retention at the same time. So, kind of no brainer. But every time I've tried to do things like remove subvocalization, so not actually read the book to myself, just consume it subconsciously, I don't enjoy the process as much. I really don't. And so When I was first starting my reading journey, I was optimizing, I think, for the wrong things. I was optimizing for how many books can I fit in 1 year, right? Checking the boxes, 26 books, 52 books, 104 books. How many books can I fit in 1 year? And speed reading would help me accomplish that goal. But now that I've matured a little bit and I'm reading books to solve problems or build skills, I've shifted my priority. Right now, I'm optimizing for action. I want to take action on the books that I'm reading. That's my whole thing. And so, in order to sustainably take action on the books you're reading and really consume them, you have to enjoy the process. And for me, speed reading, it's efficient, but it's not fun. And so I don't optimize for that anymore. Now, I'll tell you what, I've read 500 physical paper books over the last 10 years. And so my reading speed is pretty fast. I mean, I can read a lot faster than I did when I first started 10 years ago, but it's a sustainable speed. It's not at the expense of enjoying the process. Does that kind of make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, value over or quality over quantity rather.
Yeah, exactly. And I
And
think that's another kind of question that sometimes people ask me about. I think when you're first starting your reading process, right? You might be a young professional who's just discovered the difference between where you are today and where you want to be. And there's a gap. And people are recommending books. And so you're starting to read books. I say at that time, quantity matters more than quality. Read everything. Get a good, solid understanding of what's available. What are people thinking about? How are they teaching? What authors do you enjoy reading? What book styles sort of create the most impact for you? And then over time, when you start to get a little bit more specific with the books that you're reading, I think then there's a shift over time towards quality. And so that's what happened with me is it was like I wanted to read 100 books in a year. And then eventually I got to a point where I'm like, whoa, that's the wrong thing to optimize for. Taking action on the books that I'm reading and solving problems, that's what I currently optimize for.
hmm. And do you just make a conscious effort to, I guess, your method at the moment is just to consciously pick better books through maybe, I guess, recommendations or through your own research, um, rather than just picking the first thing on Amazon and and consuming that then?
Yes, I have a very, very detailed reading process that includes a lot of strategies and frameworks that people can use in their own reading. I detailed them in my book, Rise of the Reader: Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn. And I can give an example of what that looks like for me. So yes, as far as book discovery is concerned, there's kind of two areas of reading that I have in my life. The first is just like you mentioned, I do a better job at picking the right book. I believe there's a book to solve every problem that we face as human beings. And I stand behind that. I mean, over time, there have been about 100 billion people that have lived on planet Earth. Millions of them lived amazing lives. They figured it out. They were healthy, they were wealthy, they were happy. They spent decades of their lives studying one discipline, and then they wrote a book about it. So these books, they condense decades of somebody else's lived experience into days of consumption. They have the answers we're looking for. They solve problems. They build skills. And so you just have to find the right book. A quick tip for finding the right book: ask a mentor, somebody who has a better third-party perspective of what you're going through in your life. I think oftentimes mentors in my life have provided better book recommendations for the problems that I was looking to solve. Sometimes they weren't always so obvious. Number two, if you are researching a book on Amazon, I recommend going for the books that have the most ratings. As somebody who owns a book marketing agency, I know how difficult it is to promote and market a book. Some books get a bunch of ratings right off the bat. It's a flash in the pan and then it kind of die off. But the books that gather thousands and thousands of ratings on Amazon, it means they've stood the test of time and they're consistently being recommended. That means the word of mouth is there. That means those books are positively impacting those people. And so if a book has thousands of reviews on Amazon, it means that people are taking action as a result of reading it, and it's a good book.
Hmm.
My third recommendation is if you're in the review section of a book, toss out the 5-star reviews and toss out the 1 and 2-star reviews. Really pay attention to those 3 and 4-star reviews because those are written from a place of logic not emotion, right? It's not the author's friend or enemy rating it 5 or rating it 1 or 2 out of emotion. It's somebody who says, here was my expectation. Here's what I got. And this is what was missing from my perspective. And you'll get a lot of reviews written like that on those mega best-selling books. And you'll see people talking about the same problem that you're looking to solve. At the risk of going on a little bit of a tangent on the next step in my process, I'll kind of pause and see if you have any questions for me on that.
Yeah, just one thing that comes to mind is, as a person that has limited time, you know, reading the wrong book um, feels like a waste of time, right? Like you want to be able to choose the book that you need. Um, and so, is that an experience that you had in the beginning and maybe don't have as much now, where now you can follow the 3, 4 steps that you just mentioned, and I presume that Amazon is like your main source of information there. Obviously, Amazon started as a book selling platform, but it's overwhelming how many books there are now. It's not like you can go to um, it's not like the public library anymore, where you had a set of books that you had to pick from, and sort of choice overload. I forget the name for that.
Yeah, maybe information overload or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's like a paradox of choice. The more choices you have, the harder. But anyway, I get
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
talking
you got
about.
it.
Yes, when I first started my reading journey, I found myself halfway through a book and it wasn't answering the question that I thought I was going to answer. And so, I was optimizing for the wrong things in the beginning of my reading journey. So I wanted to finish books. And if I was reading a bad book, I would finish the bad book. I would read every word of every page. And I don't know where that came from. Nobody taught me to do that. But I think a lot of people operate in that way. They feel guilty putting down a book. Maybe it's a little bit of sunk cost bias or something like that. I heard Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss on a podcast one time talking about something called the rule of 100. And I think this is an interesting rule for people that suffer with this like I did. They say take the number 100 and subtract your age. So I just turned 30 years old. So for me, I would take 100, I would subtract 30. The result is 70. That's how many pages of a book I have to read before I'm wise enough to know whether or not it's going to solve the problem for me. So I have to read at least 70 pages before I can put a book down and move on to the next one. The older you get, the less you have to read because the wiser you have become, is the logic. So I
Hmm.
think that's a good way to think about it. And, where am I prospecting for books? On Amazon? Absolutely. Love it or hate it, Amazon has the most data. And the more data you have, the better decisions you can make. So although maybe there are too many choices, you can still filter by the number of reviews within a book genre on Amazon. And you could just look at maybe the top 10 when making your decision.
Hmm. I love it. So why don't we move on to, unless you had something that you wanted to mention there, you were saying.
Well, I was going to mention sort of my reading process, as
Hmm.
far as how to actually get the most useful information out of a book. Again, there are tons of different strategies that I teach, but I think that the first strategy I teach is probably the most important. So I can talk about that for a minute if you're up for it.
Let's do it.
I think a lot of people read without intention. And what I mean by that is maybe they have found a book to solve their problem, but they just dive right in. They don't set a goal for the book. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making. And this didn't come naturally to me at first, but over time I experimented with different formats for reading and I found what I'm about to tell you, and it's worked like a charm. So every time I start a new book, I set an intention, a SMART goal for the book. SMART is a goal setting acronym that's commonly talked about. For anybody that's not familiar with it, S stands for specific. Your goal needs to be specific. M stands for measurable. The legendary management guru Peter Drucker would say what's not being measured can't be managed. So this is going to be a new concept for a lot of people listening today because they've never set a measurable goal for the book that they're reading. A stands for attainable. You want to set a goal that's realistic, something that won't stunt your action because it's too overwhelming. R stands for relevant. You want to be emotionally connected to the goal that you're setting for the book. It needs to solve a problem or build a skill, and you need to really feel it. And then T stands for time bound. You want to set a deadline for taking action and leverage Parkinson's law. So when you combine all five of those, it's kind of the perfect goal setting formula for a book. So if I was picking up The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz for the first time, I would read the front cover, read the back cover. Maybe somebody gifted it to me. Maybe I'm reading it to solve a problem and I found the book on Amazon, whatever the case is. Then I'll set a SMART goal. Something like find and implement at least 2 ways to take things less personally by the end of January. That's an example of a SMART goal because it's specific. I know what the goal is. It's measurable. Did you find and implement at least 2 strategies for taking things less personally? Is that attainable? Of course it is. That's realistic action. That's not overwhelming. Just 2 things. Am I emotionally connected to it? I think all of us are emotionally connected to taking things personally. And then by the end of January, I give myself a deadline to take action. And so to kind of wrap up this piece that I'm teaching everybody is I will write that on the inside cover of the book, and then I'll review it every time I read another chapter. So I'm sharing my goal with the book so that the book can share the most important information that I can take action on back with me. You're leveraging the reticular activating system in your brain, our natural filtering process. Delete everything else except the actions that are going to help you solve your problem.
Hmm.
So that's just the first step in my process, but I think it's a very important step for everybody.
I'm not sure if everybody goes into a book, um, like you said, with intention. I mean, I guess it depends what your goals are, but I had a friend once tell me like, "Oh, when you read a book, like you actually can like become what that book is talking about." Um, and and my response was just, "I read books to solve problems, but I'm not sure if everybody reads books for that reason, right?" Um, and I'm not really asking a question here. It's just anecdotally like obviously there's history books, there's different genres, right? But I suppose this is specifically for something like self-help,
Yes.
which is notoriously notoriously difficult to follow or not effective, right?
Yeah. And I think listen, I read all types of books, fiction books, science fiction stuff. I read a little bit of history. I read
Mhm.
business parables of all sorts, but most of what I read and what I teach is definitely on the self-help, personal development, business front. There are benefits to reading all types of books, but yeah, what I'm talking about is specifically for that category. And I would say this to your friend, I'd say, why are you choosing to read these books if you're not going to change your behavior? Because if you read a great personal development book that has amazing lessons that can solve problems and you choose not to implement them or change your behavior, I would say that's more of a form of entertainment than it is education. And that's okay. Books can be entertaining. There's a role for entertainment, but man, these books hold so much potential for us to change behavior. And it's a shame when people choose not to use them that way.
Yeah, and I've actually realized that I'm on the side of almost only reading books just of personal development, and I'm trying to ease into books that are just entertainment for myself. Just to it's one of my goals this year to just read more books that are just purely for entertainment, right? So there's definitely that case of people that, and I'm including myself there, where the only thing they read is self help. I'm not sure if it's. I'm sure you meet a lot of those people in your
Well, I
line of
mean,
work.
listen, most of my reading is that way too, but I think when you're young and you're energetic and you're full of potential and you want to take over the world, it's a very healthy way to read.
Mm,
So, there's probably a time 10, 15, 20 years from now where maybe I'll almost exclusively be reading the classics and historical fiction and, science fiction and maybe some of the big series that have become popular, but like I'm
mhm.
not in that time period in my life either. I'm in this like, let's go and build something crazy and set myself up for my dream life type of vibe.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So, I guess we've gone over your first step for setting intention, the SMART method, and all that, right? Um, is there? I guess do you have like three quick things that people can just implement while they're like in the book they're going to read tonight, right? Um, Maybe one example could be, writing in the margin, which in my household growing up was almost a sin. Well, I'm surrounded by engineers protecting all their textbooks. But yeah, do you have, I guess, not to put you on the spot or, to have you make up something new, but uh just quick actionable things that somebody could do tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I here's one that would set your family crazy. I actually recommend ripping out pages when they truly speak to you and you're like, this is what I'm looking for. This is life changing. I can't let it go. Rip the page out of the book and keep it with you all day. You can write in the margins. You can take notes on it. You could take a picture. But for me, I love that feeling of the paper. So I will literally rip a page out of a book and carry it around with me. And every time I go for my phone or my keys or my wallet, I also pull out the page and I reread it again because here's the second point. Repetition leads to retention. Repetition leads to retention. That's how you develop a relationship with a piece of information and effectively store it for repurposing in your brain. So yeah, rip a page out. I think that that's totally cool. Now my note taking, so here can be like the actual number two. My note taking has changed over time as well. I definitely write inside of my books, but I don't take notes while I'm reading anymore because I think that reading and note taking are two totally separate activities. And I've read far too many productivity books at this point to think that any form of multitasking is efficient. And so reading is this passive sort of visual experience, whereas note taking requires a lot of reflection and rewriting and your hands and all sorts of other aspects of self. And so I separate them. My first pass through a book, I'm trying to stay with the book. If I find something related to my intention, I'll quickly circle the page number, maybe highlight the section real quick, but I want to continue reading. That's an active, deep work, a flow state that you can enter into. And then my second pass through the book, I'll only reread the pages that I've circled and the information I've highlighted, and I'll rewrite those as my notes. So that could be another tip for people is don't read at the same time that you're trying to take notes because it's sort of an inefficient use of your time, as long as you still enjoy it.
So are
And
you
then
rereading?
I'm rereading only the pieces that I've highlighted or circled, which in a 200-page book might only be 10 pages.
Hmm. So it's not an overwhelming amount. Okay. Because I'm
Right.
not one to reread books.
Well, I'd challenge you on that, but we could talk about that after. I'll give a third tip.
Go for it.
There's a great quote I read one time in a book called Black Sheep, where the author said, even the best cup of coffee in the world will taste bitter if you're in a bitter mood. And I was like, that's interesting. So even the most impactful book on the planet, it'll fail to help you if you're not in a mood where you're open to receiving information. That's sort of my longer version of it, right? Got to find a fun way to condense. But here's what I mean. A lot of people, they'll tell me, Nick, I really struggle with reading. I always fall asleep when I start a book. Like, when are you reading the book? Well, right before I go to bed, after a long day at work with my boss yelling at me, the kids running around, and my willpower is depleted, and I just can't wait to go to sleep. And that's why I fall asleep. And I'm like, that seems pretty obvious, right? So my third recommendation, quick thing for everybody to try tomorrow is read when your energy is the highest. If these books are really important to you, you should align them with your peak in energy. So for me, after my morning walk, my morning workout, I'm all showered, I'm ready to start the day. That caffeine hits my system and I'm ready to read, right? That's when I choose to do my best reading, not at night after everything's been depleted.
Hmm. I love it. I think I may actually just do that by accident because I usually read when I get sun during the day. I try to, spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever I can that day and getting vitamin D, not just for fun. And I usually, read my 10 pages or whatever it is that I read uh, for the goal, and obviously sometimes go over that depending how long I stay. But yeah, I mean that's when I'm at peak energy, and the sun gives me extra energy, and it all adds together. So,
Yeah, it does. It stacks. Yeah, I'm also very conscious of my health, and I follow all of the biohackers. And I mean, my morning routine includes like 20 crazy things that people are always laugh at, but I like it, man. I optimize for energy. That's what's most important to me.
I've been to the whole biohacking thing for years now, so you gotta talk about your 20 crazy things.
I mean, I can give an example of what my routine looks like today. I've had as many as 20 individual line items in my morning routine, probably even more at its peak. It's been simplified a little bit today. So I'll give you what it looks like today. Today, when I wake up, the first thing I do is go for a 1 hour walk in the sun with my dog. So there's a park pretty close to my house. What is that doing for me? I'm getting that early morning sun exposure as the sun is coming up before I consume caffeine. I'm breathing in the fresh air. I'm getting the exercise endorphins flowing, and that has a lot of mood boosting benefits, etc. Then I go home, right? And I'm also drinking a lot of water during this experience, again, before consuming caffeine. Then when I get home, there are a series of supplements that I take before I go to the gym, but I stay fasted. So none of these supplements will break my fast. I stay in autophagy, for instance. I practice a pretty tight intermittent fasting schedule, and then there are longer fasts throughout the week and month. Then I hit the gym. It's mostly weightlifting. And again, the benefit there, exercise endorphins are flowing, more muscle, you burn more resting calories, etc. I enjoy being strong. Then I head home and I do a 20-minute transcendental meditation in front of my red light. So that's where I kind of lose people every once in a while. But red light therapy has been amazing for me. I have one of the big red light boxes and I do the 20-minute meditation, which has also been incredibly powerful for me. Then right before I shower, and this is unique because I'm in the Boston, Massachusetts area and it's winter right now, but I do cold plunge and I cold plunge every day, almost every day. And the water temperature for me is 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius. So it's cold. And I try to stay in there for up to 3 minutes. And I mean, talk about endorphins flowing through your body for up to, I don't know, up to a couple hours after that. And, at this point, I shower, I change, and I'm drinking water this entire time. I've probably already had a gallon at this point. And then I'll sit down and read my book before my morning huddle. So I run an agency. We have a morning huddle every day at 10 a.m. I'll read until the morning huddle. I sit on, again, people laugh at me, but I sit on a pulsed electromagnetic frequency, PEMF, grounding mat as I read. And then boom, my day starts. So that's what it looks like today. And as you can tell, I'm definitely into it, just like you are.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You didn't lose me with the red light or anything. So, glad to meet another fellow, I guess, quote unquote biohacker. But question though, that when you're doing the cold plunge, is that a cold plunge in a tub or is that just a shower and then you switch the temperature on that?
It's in a tub. It's outside. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair
So
enough.
yeah, I've
I,
got a full tub that sits outside and it's as cold as you can imagine.
yeah, fair enough. My my brother, we both cold plunge, and he used to live in the Netherlands, and he would tell me that every morning he would go out to do his cold plunge, but he had to break the top layer of ice.
Oh yeah, I'm there with her.
Fair enough.
I'm there
Fair
with
enough.
him. Yeah, I could show you a video of yesterday. I won't because the podcast audience won't care, but yeah, I'll send you my personal Instagram after. I post a lot of my cold plunges over there.
Cool, cool. Awesome. Have you been doing biohacking for a long time? I'm sure you've sort of got into it with Dave Asprey and all that type of stuff back in the day with Bulletproof.
Yes. In fact, I still drink bulletproof coffee. But yes, I've been
I sort of
I've been
overloaded on that.
yeah, me too. I've been focused on optimizing for energy. That's kind of how I describe it, optimizing for energy, maybe for 3 or 4 years now. And so I follow creators like Dave Asprey. Nowadays Brian Johnson, the guy who sold whatever Venmo, and now he invests 2 million a year into his health. And on my podcast, I've interviewed Dr. David Sinclair, who writes about longevity. I've interviewed Peter Diamandis, who co-wrote Life Force with Tony Robbins. I read Why We Sleep and by Dr. Matthew Walker. I'm a sleep nerd as well. I sleep on an 8 sleep mattress pad with mouth tape on and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, I've been into it for a number of years now.
You should look into Dave Asprey. He made a podcast with a dentist in California called Dr. Dwight Jennings. You should look into it because, in my opinion, you shouldn't need mouth tape. At night, you should just naturally be able to close and breathe through your nose and all that stuff. So for anybody listening and is into weird stuff, it's one of my more weirder biohacks that I did. So,
What did you
um,
get did you break your jaw and get it realigned or something?
no, so he realigns the way your teeth come in together. So he actually expanded my upper jaw by like a centimeter almost. And so now,
Did
bit
you have
weird, but
to break it or
my
just
teeth. No, he just naturally expanded it. He has like palate expanders that he
nice?
uses. It's just it's sort of it's like a weird bulky retainer that you wear at night sometimes, or at night every night, and then another one that's a little lighter that you wear during the day. But it's actually so much more of a pleasurable experience than braces. It doesn't hurt at all. You don't talk funny like you do with Invisalign. So the whole experience is actually pretty interesting. And the only weird thing is every time I go to the dentist, like for a regular cleaning thing, the dentist freaks out because my teeth here in the front, they touch tip to tip, which is not your standard bite. But I'll
Oh,
leave
I
that to
love
you to read about. But
Yeah, I love it. I interviewed James Nestor, the author of Breath, and,
hmm
so I understand everything that you're talking about. I'll have to check that out too. I haven't had it done, obviously. I what was crazy for me, and this got me sort of anti the traditional health establishment in the US,
hmm
was that I've always snored. I've snored since I was a little kid, and you call it sleep apnea, disruption, choking on your tongue, whatever you want to call it. I've always snored. And once I learned that it was bad for me, I set up a consultation with my normal doctor. And he told me I was too young for to qualify through insurance for like a CPAP machine or any type of like assisted breathing. And I'm like, I'm too young for it. So you won't. I was like, these rules are just so broken. And anyway, I focus so much on my sleep. I wear an Aura ring, and like I said, I got the 8 sleep mattress pad and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. What's your experience with the Aura Ring, real quick? Just I've been curious about it. Never actually met somebody that had one. So.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Here's the bottom line for me, and I mentioned this during the SMART goal kind of thing that I was talking about. What's not being measured can't be managed. So let's say that I said, okay, I want to start wearing mouth tape. Well, how am I supposed to know if it's actually improving my sleep or not? There's no data. Yes, I might feel better, but am I making that up? Like, I want numbers. I'm looking for data. And so the Aura Ring is nice because it provides you data on your total sleep time, as well as your total sleep time in each stage. So deep sleep, REM sleep, like kind of light sleep, awake time, all that kind of stuff, number of disturbances, how long it takes you to fall asleep, body temperature, all of this data. And so when I make a change, I want to know whether or not it's actually working. And so I'm always looking at the data. I'm always adjusting I'm always analyzing against my baseline when I try something new.
I love it. Data is king,
Mm,
and cash, but both
both.
of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so you mentioned that you have correct me if I'm wrong, a book marketing agency.
Yes.
So I'm curious to talk a little bit about marketing. Maybe you could first of all explain a little bit about what your business is, what you do there, and then we can delve a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I'll give the backstory on kind of how it started as well, because this might be interesting. So when I was a recent college graduate, I was working a full-time software sales position, and I was reading books on sales and marketing, persuasion, negotiation, and I was applying them directly to the sales role that I had. And as a result, I was experiencing a lot of success. And I was trying to get friends, family, coworkers to pay attention to this information because it was working really well for me financially. And of course, then I'm starting to branch off into all other areas of health and wealth and personal finances and headspace and everything. but nobody wanted to read. So I started posting the books that I was reading on social media, really as a way to connect with like-minded people. And had some initial ideas for how to monetize it that failed. But what did happen was, as my audience grew and I connected with like-minded people, authors started to reach out to me and they would offer to pay me for book reviews. I have this big audience. If I can read their book, maybe people will buy it. So I started to experiment with that. I tried all different types of things related to book promotion and marketing as a side hustle. And I got really invested in the industry again, because I genuinely believe in the power of these books. And over time, I was able to build it to a place where it could support me. And instead of leaving my full-time job, I actually started to hire people within my agency and start to build it out while I retain my full-time job. So anyway, fast forward until today, I've got 10 people on my team between full-time and part-time employees. And we work with about 200 authors a year to help them promote and market their books. And there's kind of three core things that we do at my agency. One is short form video content, where we'll help an author turn their physical book into 50 or 100 pieces of professional video content for social media. Number two, we do some podcast booking, so placing authors on shows to talk about their books. And then number three, we have a community across social platforms of a couple 100,000 followers. And so we still get paid to promote books and post about them and interview authors on our podcast and that kind of stuff.
I love it. It sort of organically grew from your interests. So I'm curious, what are your favorite marketing and sales books, or what could be one book of either category that you could recommend? I know that's a big category, but
Yes, I have so many favorites, having read so many books at this point. My favorite sales book, I haven't read it in a few years, but I think my favorite sales book is called Gap Selling, GAP, Gap Selling. And I mean, the primary idea behind it is there's a gap between where your prospective customer is and where they want to be. And how can you fill that gap? How can you help them envision a more positive future? And there are a lot of great tips in that book. It's one that I don't see talked about, which is why I like to recommend it, Gap Selling. And then as far as marketing, I think the best book I've read so far is $100 Million Leads by Alex
Hmm.
Hormozy. And so that book's newer, only came out 4 or 5 months ago. And there are a bazillion good kind of lead generation suggestions in that book that I think ultimately are the best form of marketing. And so that's what I would recommend reading.
That book's on its way to me, so I'll be reading it
Good.
shortly.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you what, we just had Alex on our podcast. He's amazing.
awesome. Yeah, he's an interesting character, and I thought he was older than he is. I think he's like 31 or 32. He's a young guy, so interesting character.
Yes,
Uh,
he is.
but he actually has two books that he put out right simultaneously. I think it's $100 Million Leads and $100 Million
So
something else.
offers came out about 2 years ago,
Mm,
$100 Million Offers. And that's one of my favorite books as well. I mean, I absolutely love that book. It helped my business grow tremendously. In fact, my testimonial for that book actually gets used in his keynote presentations and some of his online courses because it did so much for me. I owe a lot of the success that my agency has had over the last couple of years to Alex and what he teaches.
hmm. Something that he said recently sort of struck me. Let me see if I can get this right. He mentioned how when you make that change from, uh, I'll give his story, right? It's sort of like he had a well-paying job, sort of what the quote unquote 22, 3-year old should have, and was sort of on the path to um to being quote unquote successful. And he sort of dropped down and then became a gym coach, right? Which could be a little bit not viewed by your circle as a positive thing. And he talks about how you need to sort of drop and be willing to do that and not care. And I'm curious if you ever went through that a little bit. I know that you sort of simultaneously worked there, but I'm curious if you had a similar experience.
Yeah. I mean, 2 steps back, 5 steps forward type of idea.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, in the software company that I was working for, I went from intern to director of sales, managing a small sales team, but for a big company. And we went through multiple acquisitions and I had a bunch of responsibility and was making a lot of money. And then in the evening, in my own little startup business, right, I'm sending cold DMs through Instagram to authors and I'm being paid small amounts of money to read books. Like my first, I was making 6 figures US while I was being paid $10 to read a book. Right. So I think that's probably my version of that. Why
Hmm.
are you spending your time on this? Well, you know what? I know that over time, I can build this into something that I truly enjoy doing and get paid a heck of a lot more for. It's going to take a little bit of time. And so, yes, I think that's probably my version of that.
Can you give any advice to somebody that wants to make that jump? It's not an easy jump to make.
Yes, I'll say that 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. And the biggest mistake that I've seen people make is they jump too fast. I had an early mentor of mine, Kevin Horsley, the author of Unlimited Memory. Brilliant guy. I remember him telling me, Nick, don't make the jump. Don't try to build the parachute on the way down. He said, build the parachute and then jump. Because if you try to jump too soon, you'll operate from a place of scarcity. You'll compromise on your values, integrity. Customers will sense that. You'll be sporadic, chaotic. And then if you fail, you won't try again. So slow and steady wins the race. No matter how many times you read Aesop's fable, The Tortoise and the Hare, the tortoise always wins. And so my advice is slow and steady. Build up your side hustle to a point where it's more sustainable than it probably is today. And then make the jump once you're ready. I mean, like I mentioned, I had full-time employees before I made the jump. So slow and steady wins the race. And if you can find a full-time position that teaches you a skill set that's transferable into your side hustle, then you're not wasting your time. That's for sure.
That's one idea that I've kept in mind, that you're never wasting time. There's always something that you're learning about. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, if you want to share how people can find you, um, where your book is sold, I'm assuming Amazon. Feel free to share.
Yeah, my book is available in every major online retailer, including Amazon. So, wherever you are on this beautiful planet, you can search for Rise of the Reader, Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn by yours truly, Nick Hutchison, and get more from the books you're reading. And then, listen, our most vibrant community is on Instagram at Book Thinkers, spelled just like it sounds. And over there, you can see all sorts of amazing book recommendations.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for jumping on with me, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.